Hey guys, this is Steve Huff at SteveHuffPhoto.com, and look at this. I'm here with two brand new lenses for the Sony FE mount, which is the full frame mount, A7, A7R, A7S, A7 II. All beautiful cameras. I personally prefer the A7 II and A7S. I own both. I'm filming this video with the A7S, as a matter of fact, and the Sony 28 f2, which is one of my favorite lenses for the FE system, as well as the least expensive. But right here I have two lenses. Both are beasts, and if you look at them, actually I'm going to throw in another lens here to show you the size difference. Many of you know the size of the Sony 55-1.8 or the Zeiss 55-1.8, and there it is right in the middle. So you can see how much bigger these two bad boys are. And I'll tell you right now what I have on the stool right here. The first one up is the Sony 90mm macro lens. This is a 90mm f28, which is going to be you're basically an optimum macro lens. 90 f28 has been the go-to for many people when it comes to macro lenses. You're getting that reach, and that's what people want. I have been using it for 2 or 3 weeks sparingly because I don't really do much macro work. And the last macro lens I tested was the amazing Olympus 60mm macro, which to me was my favorite macro lens that I've ever used. So now we have this big Sony, and it's a G lens, so it's not a Zeiss, it's not anything super fancy, but the IQ image quality is fantastic. I have shot a lot of things with it, and it looks great. It looks sharp, the color's nice, and the lens build is solid as can be. On the side, you have a switch here for the optical steady shot. Now, with something like the A7 II using the 5-axis, if you turn this off on the lens, you'll use the 5-axis of the A7 II. If you're using an A7S without image stabilization, you turn that on and you're going to have image stabilization, optical image stabilization built into the lens. Now up here, depending on your range to your subject, if you're shooting really close up, you want to set that range to its minimum. If you're shooting from a distance, say you're shooting a portrait, put it on full, and that way your focus will work the quickest. The Sony macro lens, my review should be up within a week or so. It's a great lens, and if you want a macro for your Sony system, this is about the only game in town. The only negative I found with it is its size. It's pretty big, and the focus is a little on the slower side, but that is par for the course for every macro lens made. This is a fantastic lens. Many of you are into macro or portraits. This makes a great portrait lens because it's 90mm f28. But for macro, highly recommend the Sony 90 f28G lens. It actually has this too, which I love, the focus clutch. If you want AF, put it up. If you want to quickly fine tune, put it down, and there you go. You could fine tune the focus, which is mandatory for macro lenses. So this is a great feature they added right there. And that's pretty much all one would need in a macro lens. If we take off the front cap, you can see the lens element right there. Let's take off the back. And you have a nice quality construction here. It feels pretty hefty without being really heavy. So I have no complaints on the build or performance of the Sony macro. If I was a macro shooter, I'd be buying this in a nanosecond. So now let's move on to the new Speedmaster lens. If you guys have been with my site for a while, you'll remember when I reviewed the 59.5 Speedmaster lens, and then they named it the Dark Knight, which was basically a super fast 50, like a Noctilux, but at like 1/11th the price. Now it wasn't a competition for the Leica Noctilux. It wasn't nearly as sharp, perfected, didn't have the bokeh of that lens, but it was a very good lens if you want a fast 50, and was great for portraits. So now they've released the 85 millimeter Speedmaster, which clocks in at f1.2. So if you guys know, an 85 f1.2 is pretty amazing. Canon's 85 1.2 L lens was one of my favorite lenses of all time for a good 10 years. That lens was magical. It still is. It's an amazing lens, but it's thick, it's heavy, it's huge, it focuses slow. It's not an everyday lens. This, I would say the same thing. It's not an everyday lens, but it is an 85 millimeter, perfect for portraits. You have that f1.2 speed. And of course, you can go all the way up to f16, depending on your situation or your use. But oh my God, it's probably twice as heavy as this Sony. It's a real legitimate beast of a lens. All metal construction, feels fantastic, and hopefully this will focus okay. But I have here number 100. This has a 77 millimeter filter size. And if you like fast glass, this thing is a beast. I know I've said that 3 times, but when I hold it in my hand, that's the first word that pops to mind. Now, I took a few sample shots already with it wide open at f1.2 because I figured if it was soft at f1.2, then it would be pointless to even review it. Because if somebody sells a lens and has the aperture of f1.2, I expect it to be usable at that aperture. There was a lens, I forgot the name of it a while ago, that was a f9.5 lens, and it was awful at f9.5, so I didn't even review it. It was pretty pricey as well. But this guy, I took a few shots at f1.2 and it's gorgeous. The bokeh is gorgeous, it's sharp at f1.2. If you nail the focus, it's very hard to nail the focus, especially if you're within that minimum focus range. The minimum focus distance is 1 meter, so you can't get very close with it. So you're looking at what, 3 feet from your subject. That's similar to most Leica lenses of the old days. They were always 1 meter. Now they're 0.7 or something like that. So it does have the 1 meter, but you're going to need that because if you were any closer, your shallow depth of field would be insane. So I have a lot of testing to do with this lens, but so far it's pretty nice, and the price point, $799, is tough to beat. Very tough to beat for what you're getting here. It's not cheap in any way. It's built, it feels like if Leica made well, they do make a 90 f2, but if they made a 90 f1.2, for example, the old 75 Summilux, 75-1.4, this feels sturdier than the old Summilux. So build quality, I'm not worried about in the slightest. It is manual focus only, and you don't need an adapter. It goes right onto the Sony full frame lens, $799. So look for my review in the next couple of weeks. Both of these lenses for the Sony system. So far, they're both getting a thumbs up from me. But always come back to stevehufpphoto.com for news, reviews, daily inspirations, and everything photographic. One more thing I forgot to mention. The Speedmaster lens comes with this awesome case. So basically, as you can see, if I open it up, here's my little certificate for the lens. And the lens fits right inside. So it's a custom case for the lens, even though it's a pretty tight fit. There we go. So there's the lens in the case. Snaps up for you to take it with anywhere, and it's protected because a lens like this, you want to keep it protected. You don't want to jangle it around too much. So at the $799 price point, you usually don't see custom cases like this, so it's really cool. So if you've been eyeballing this lens, I would say it's a pretty safe purchase. I know a lot of people loved their 59.5. A couple people had problems with it. So I don't know about reliability. I've only had it a few days. But look for all of my thoughts after I use it more in my review.